Well, hey everybody, Chuck Holton here, and I've got my good friend Tim Miller back with us to talk about security stuff. There's a whole lot going on in this world, and you probably have been noticing just sort of the uptick in sort of violent incidents, not just overseas, but also in the United States. Tim, as you probably know, is a former Secret Service agent, former federal agent, former policeman, former Marine. The only thing he's not a former is a former follower of Christ and former husband to LaDonna. And so, good thing.
Those will always stay current.
That's right. That's right. And I like bringing Tim on because he's always got good perspective about how we can make our families safer in today's uncertain world. And so, Tim, let's talk first about this ramming attack that took place in the Christmas market in Magdeburg, Germany, which nobody had ever heard of until this happened. But apparently, it had a big Christmas market every year. It was a real big deal for the community. And this year, a Saudi Arabian doctor who'd been in the country for more than 20 years just drove his car at a very high rate of speed through the market and killed, I think, 5 people, wounded dozens. Mm-hmm. What have you heard anything else about that besides that? Something about, I mean, was this an act of terror?
Yeah, I don't think there's any question, Chuck. And let's be clear. I mean, the date was one day off from the Berlin attack in the market. And what's concerning to me is he was what you and I would call embedded into the country, clearly had radical ideology. Mm-hmm. The concern, he was a doctor. He had been thinking about, now think about this, he would have been the person that was treating the people he was trying to murder, had he not been the person that's done that. So I think it's concerning from the perspective, the motivation of terrorism, but it's also really concerning as we think through the simplicity of the attack. Chuck, you and I were talking about this. When you think of a person getting into a vehicle, being ideologically fueled, just looking for people, that's a very, very concerning method of attack. I know you've reported on this for years, and I think we recently saw a vehicle attack in Texas, a person driving through JCPenney's. I think that investigation's still underway, but I think,
They just thought it was a drive-through.
Yeah. Wow.
I didn't know JCPenney's had a drive-through. Yeah. Actually, there was a ramming attack in London yesterday on Christmas Day. It kind of got lost, when people aren't watching the news a whole lot on Christmas, but 4 people were injured in that ramming attack. Again, ideologically motivated. Now, the interesting thing about this Magdeburg attack is that the media immediately came out and said, no, this guy's social media shows that he's an atheist, that he was anti-Muslim, that he was not an extremist, except on the video where they're apprehending him, you can hear him screaming, Allahu Akbar. So there's that. But nevertheless, I mean, forget about the motivation. This guy there, look, we can never know the motivation of someone else until they are shooting at us or until they are trying to run us over. That's not something that we can ascertain just by looking at somebody most of the time. So how do we avoid getting into a situation where we become the victim of a ramming attack, especially? Gosh, can you just not walk on the street anymore? Can you just not go to any place that's got large crowds of people? Is there a way to mitigate that?
Yeah, and remember, you probably heard this from me at nausea, but in the Secret Service, our security was proactive. It's all about making it not happen. Well, what are some things you can do to make it not happen? Well, number one, you can say, hey, that's probably not the best choice. Not that we don't live our life, but being in large crowds, especially in centralized areas, if you are going to go, I always recommend you stay on the fringes. We have a guy on our team who was in the Las Vegas shooting while it occurred. We just did a podcast on that. And one of the things he said is the most horrible thing he ever experienced. Now, this is a bad guy. He was a Secret Service sniper. He was a crisis action team member, ATF supervisor for the warrant entry folks. He is a a bad guy. He said the sickest feeling I ever heard was realizing that I was trapped in the crowd as this maniac was systematically killing people around him. And so one of the things he says is when you go to large crowds, if you're going to go, which that may be a consideration, stay in the periphery, stay in place. You may not have the best view. Everybody wants to be the third row right in the center. But in today's world, it may be wise just to say, you know what, we're going to go. I want to be a part of it, but we're going to stay strategically located near exits. We've had this talk for those that identify secondary exits. Everywhere they go, their chances of survival go up about 80%.
I know I do.
Crisis. Yeah.
I mean, I don't go anywhere. If I'm in a public place, I'm always looking for the exits. I'm always thinking about out of the box thinking, because a lot of people, when you come into the mall or the venue or whatever through one door, that's the only door your brain thinks about going out. And I'm always trying to break that mold by thinking about, how could I go out the back way? How could I go backstage? How could I go out the other exits? Just to be thinking about it so that because there's no time to think about it when it's happening.
Yeah, what's interesting too, Chuck, we did some analysis on the Nairobi mall shooting. Remember that when the terrorists came in? I've actually been in that
Westgate.
mall. Yeah, the Westgate Mall. What was interesting is many of the victims that died right down the center lane, the big open areas. And if you think about it, if you're in a mall and you run into any store, at the back of that mall or that store is an exit. And it usually goes to a relatively safe place. But what happens in our minds when crisis occurs and we've never thought about it is our mind sets up the roadblock and says, oh, you can't use that door.
Yeah, it says employees only.
Yeah, that's right.
Sorry,
yeah.
I gotta die.
And the same thing with even driving. If you're going to drive, you don't want to be in the center. You want to be in the far left, far right. And oh, by the way, curbs work really well to drive over them. If you got to go, get your mindset, to your point, Chuck. We've got to get the mindset into one of preparedness and wisdom, but we also have to have the skill. We got to put skill with those two.
And don't be afraid to break the rules, because in a combat environment, the rules go out the window. You do what you have to do to survive, no matter what.
That's right.
So in that vein, we've seen a bunch of really disturbing attacks in urban areas in the United States recently. I'm thinking of the woman who was set fire to by an illegal migrant in the metro or the subway in New York, and everybody just watched. Nobody did anything. They just watched. Now, I think there's a reason for that, because the city has prosecuted people who have stepped in the past, in the recent past. Daniel Penny comes to mind. But what's the right thing to do in a situation like that?
Yeah, Chuck, you and I are of a different flavor. I believe, and I did in the Marine Corps, you did in the Army, I believe that there are certain things in our life that are worth sacrificing for, even unto death. And, quite frankly, our government, I think intentionally, has discouraged good people from caring for each other. And that's a dangerous place to be, as we saw on the Metro. How many people could have stopped him had they had courage, wisdom, and preparation to go do what needed to be done? And let's think through this. Let's not oversimplify it. Walk up to him and slap the lighter or the match out of his hand. Grab him and say, no, you're not doing that. But what do? We film. And that's a dangerous place to be. And so to your point, Chuck, I think we all have to decide what's worth standing for. I shared with you before we came on, I just watched the movie Bonhoeffer. And let me tell you, there are a lot of parallels to what was going on in Nazi Germany, with the government, telling them crazy things. But thank God there were some, Bonhoeffer being one, that said, no, I'm standing for what's right, even if it costs me my life. And to your point, I think I'm praying that there's a generation that wakes up to this craziness behind us and says, no, I'm not going to sit there and watch it happen. I don't care. Sue me. Lock me up. I will not stand by and watch innocent people victimized. That's just not in our DNA.
Daniel Penny just spent a year in prison for that very thing, and thank God he was eventually exonerated, although his life was ruined in the process. And I hope that he sues them for billions of dollars.
Right.
I hope he becomes a very, very wealthy man out of that, because he did step up and do something about it. Now, when it comes to, again, avoiding those kind of situations with your family, number one, I'd say if I go to New York, even if the taxi is more expensive or takes longer, I'm taking a taxi.
Right.
I'm not going to ride that metro. If I have a chance to, if somebody asks me to come to New York for a meeting and I have a chance to do it remotely, I'm going to do it remotely. I'm not going to travel
Right.
at all. What do you think we should be? Where's the line? Like,
Yeah.
there are a lot of things that we don't have to do that we choose to do, and then there are things that we have to go do. But how do you make those decisions in your life?
Well, let me give you an example. Our team was just in San Francisco training a very large company. And as I talked to the employees of that company, when we were right downtown, right in the midst of the chaos, every one of them is frustrated at the state of crime. And you couldn't walk down the street, and Chuck, I know you've reported on this. It's amazing that under the banner of care and compassion, we're watching people destroy themselves, bent over, large open wounds. And so the first question I always ask, and I was going fully prepared. I'd done some research. Google Earth is a wonderful thing. Where's the hotel? What are the direct routes there? And of course, I'm generally traveling with some of our teams, so we're probably prepared and trained. But the reality is, you do have to ask yourself if you're going into some of those areas, and let me just stress this, where laws don't matter. Grab that. America has become a place in certain states where laws don't matter. And we all know, going back to our fifth grade bully, if you don't stand up against that bully, he's going to take your lunch money. You're going to be much poorer, every day. So I think that spirit of the people responsible for their own security is trying to be trampled down. So to your point, I always encourage people, do your research. Look where the venue is. Look where you're flying into. Most people don't think about traveling from the airport into their hotels. You could be going through, as we did, through some bad areas. But then also try to time your travel and your activities during the day if possible. Not saying you're safe, but you're much less likely to get attacked if there are people around and if it's in the daytime. And I'm sad to report that that's just the state of where we are in the U.S.
Yeah, it is.
And then when we saw the FBI come clean and report what's actually going on in terms of their crime reporting, 4.5% increase in violent crimes. That's amazing.
Now, talk about that some more, because some people may not have heard that news.
Yeah, so, and you can, obviously I work for the government, but I am very distrustful of what we've heard coming out, simply because it seems like, and Chuck, you're extremely good at this, you'll hear one talking point, and then you start doing research and you find out, wait a minute, that's not true. That's not at all what happened. Well, why are they doing that? It's to shape public opinion. The great news now is, because of shows like yours and others, you can get the truth. And so the FBI came out with their uniform crime report. They reported, hey, prior to the election, everything's great, crime's going down, blah, blah, blah. And then some very, very conscientious news organizations started going, no, whoa, wait a minute, and they pressed in, only to find out a revised estimate came out that suggested that violent crime had actually increased 4.5%. Violent crimes, rape, murder.
In the last year?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And so when you look at that reporting, it should cause all of us to go, wait a minute, why would you want me to believe that I'm safe going into certain areas when I'm not? And so going back to our point, I always encourage everybody, congratulations, raise your right hand. You're your own security director. Mm-hmm. You are responsible for protecting yourself and your family. And to do that, like anything else that you want to do well, you got to invest in it. You got to put time, effort, and training into it.
That's right. You know, we've seen far too much of this. Like you say, the government has gotten very, very good at reclassifying things and calling them something different, whether it's the national debt, whether it's the inflation rate, whether it's the unemployment rate, or, as you showed, the crime rate. They just, all they have to do is redefine what they call violent crime, and they can make up a number that says, oh, look, violent crime is down. But if you go back and measure it by the measure that they used to have, which is what I want to do, that you find, oh gosh, it actually got quite a bit worse. And they're just lying with statistics. So this is why, they always say that there are lies, damn lies, and statistics. So looking forward in our country over the next 4 years, what do you foresee happening in terms of crime, unrest, difficulties like that in the United States, and what can people do to be prepared to deal with that?
So, Chuck, that's the golden question, and you are the masters. You've actually taught me so much about what's happening in the Darian Gap, what was happening with the inflow. Conservative estimates 10 to 12 million. I think we're going to see even more than that. Now, remember, folks, they walked across the border with whatever ideology and hatred towards our country that they had. A good immigration system is designed to protect all of us from people that hate our country. And we all know it's not the majority of the people coming in that fit this bill. But when you're talking 10 million, let's just say it's 10%, you're looking at 10 million, interestingly enough, and you pointed this out, military age males walking across the border. And then the question is, to where? And let me just tell you, we don't know. I think the incoming administration under Holton is going to really go after identifying who are those really bad people. How do we identify where they are? But let's not even hold back in speaking the truth to your audience. Those people are going to attack. We saw one on the subway. Mm-hmm. We saw an innocent woman lit on fire, to your point, and people watched it. Well, it's kind of a double-edged sword here, because on the one hand, you've got these people here, they're not afraid of the police. And on the other hand, you've got good people that could be involved in stopping it are going, no, I don't want anything to do with that. Mm-hmm. And so I think to answer your question, Chuck, we're going to see major violence in the U.S. over the next 4 years. I think there will be an effort to try to thwart that, or to get some folks that are really bad and kick them out. But you and I know, and everybody that's honest knows, you're not going to identify and deport efficiently all of the bad players that have come across.
No, I think they have to make it so that they self-deport, just make it so painful or difficult for them to be here that it's not worth it for them, and they mm-hmm. leave on their own. But at the same time, you have to understand, after watching the last Trump administration, how the left intentionally fomented unrest and violence and protest every day of his administration in order to make living in America so miserable under a Republican president that people just wouldn't not want to vote for a Republican anymore. Mm-hmm. And I think without a doubt we're going to see that again. And they're just waiting until Inauguration Day. That's why I plan to be in Washington, D.C. on Inauguration Day. And I think that I may do a lot more reporting, conflict reporting in the United States over the next 4 years than out of the United States, at least more than I have in the past. So of course, my job is to go into those places. But if it's not your job to go into places like that, then I would suggest that you look for ways to stay away from places that will be flashpoints. The area around the White House would be one, places like that. What other places might people want to avoid if possible?
Well, I think certainly we're seeing with the rise of the, Palestine movement, hopefully that's getting, tamped down. I think we're going to see that take off again. And that's very reminiscent of, the riots we saw across the country in 2020, where there was absolute lawlessness. Now, remember, if people aren't afraid of the police, then there are no rules. We can attack and burn courthouses. We can do anything we want. So the first thing, we've got to overcome this mindset, Chuck, all of us. We're not in Kansas anymore. This is a very different United States that we're living in this season. And we have to think through the lens of security. And that's preparation, not paranoia. You've heard me enough. I don't traffic in fear. I traffic in wisdom and preparation and training. And so if folks are talking about going to celebrations, even balls in the District of Columbia, many folks are going to attend balls, which is great. I think they'll have appropriate security in the DC area. However, to your point, if large crowds show up and you've been in the middle of them, I've been in the middle of them, it changes on a dime. And now you got to.
They may have security in the ball, but then when you're leaving to go back to your car is where they get you. That's where you got to really think hard about where you're parking, how you're getting in, how you're getting out.
And multiple exits. One of the things you have to think of, well, what if I can't come in the way I came out? But then most importantly, you got to really think through, okay, is this something that I want to wisely prepare and plan for? I want to be, I quote you all the time, I want to be the one in the room that's prepared, and because I'm there, I make everybody else safe. And that really starts with the mindset. And many people, even on my channel, many people will say, oh, I don't think it's that bad. Okay, you think what you want. But I will tell you that the evidence, and all you have to do is turn on the news, is becoming more and more obvious that it's very important that we all have a security plan. And as part of that security plan, in the Secret Service, we would do advance work. We would go ahead of any protectee going. Why? Because we want to see, we want to get the layout. Well, you can do that very easily through Google Earth. You can check out crime stats. You can actually see, in many cases, in the larger cities, it's becoming more and more violent. Places like Baltimore in the Inner Harbor, where it used to be relatively safe, that's a do not admit zone down there. That's crazy what's going on there. Detroit, LA. And so I always encourage people, if you're not going to be your security director and plan ahead, meaning, okay, something happens, how do I get out of here? Well, if you don't have a route planned in advance, you know this, Chuck, it's likely not going to go well as you're trying to figure it out. But then also get some training. In many of the states, we honor our right to protect ourselves, under the Second Amendment. Well, if that's the case, then make sure that you're trained and prepared. Most horrifying words I hear as a firearms instructor is, oh, I got a gun and I'm carrying it. And it's like, no, we want the, hey, I have a tool and, I'm training with it. I'm preparing. I understand the laws. Those are the things that make everybody safe.
Yep. Well, as we come up to a new year, 2025, I am sitting down and making some goals for my own preparedness, because I want to be that guy who can make other people safer wherever I go, not just be my security director, but be other people's security if need be. Right. And so I'm just to share some of my own goals. I want to be able to run. I want to be able to carry. I carry heavy loads, and I want to be able to fight. And so I'm looking at my goals for this year are to get my VO2 max to 40, which is a pretty high rate, and especially for an old guy like me, to be able to, I've been doing heavy rucking, not just going for runs, but actually rucking heavy weight so that I could carry a wounded person if necessary. And I've been training hard with that concealed carry tool in order to be able to protect myself and other people just on a dime without even thinking about it. And you know what? That is an investment in a safe society. And I would encourage all of you to think about your fitness. Think about, maybe you're not going to be able to carry somebody that's wounded off the battlefield, but if you if you can, you should be able to do it. And you should be able to, you should be prioritizing that fitness and setting goals, asking yourself, what do I want to be able to do if called upon to do so? My job, I might be called upon to carry somebody off the battlefield, and so I've got to be ready for that. And when the time comes, that's not the time to be thinking about getting prepared. I need to do it right now.
Jeff, Chuck, my friend Jeff Rice, the one I was telling you about that was in the middle of the Las Vegas shooting. He had probably 20 people shot to his right and left. He he immediately recognized it was rifle fire. He told everybody to get down and actually grabbed his wife and threw her down. Everybody around him was saying, no, it's fireworks, as they were being shot. So to your point, and I know if you go to at LionHeart Skills, you can hear what he says. The one thing he says, and we're doing a part 2 for how did you survive that, is you have to be able to have the mental ability to stay calm. To your point, a guy right next to him was hit in the neck through and through. He threw him over his shoulder, and he had to run in a weave way because the firing was still ongoing. At the end of that process, he then had to do medical care. At the end of that process, unfortunately, the person didn't make it. He realized he was still in the danger zone. I didn't realize that went on for 15 minutes. Mm-hmm. So to your point, Chuck, for you and I, if we can't sustain ourselves physically for 15 minutes or more, it's not likely that things are going to go well, especially if we're having to carry family members or, in this case, innocent people. And so now is the time to prepare. What a great resolution. For you and I, we understood the importance of fitness from the military. Maybe others don't. But I will tell you, and you've been there and I've been there, when it happens, you literally have to be able to respond instantly and not even thinking about it because you've prepared and trained for that.
You got to be trained. All right. Well, folks, I highly recommend you go to @LionHeart Skills and look at Tim's YouTube channel over there. He's got some really good stuff using real life examples, like you said, interviews with people who have been there, been through it. And you can learn a lot from a YouTube channel like that. So I highly recommend you go and subscribe over at Tim's channel. Also, I hope you'll subscribe to a Hot Zone here and go to chuckholton.com. You get a lot more there that we can't give you on this YouTube channel because we get demonetized so much. So maybe we'll get Tim over there and do a special live just for our supporters at some point. But thank you, Tim. I appreciate you coming on with us, and I hope you have a great new year.
Chuck, thank you for being an honest voice in the midst of a lot of raging winds. I'm very grateful for you. I'm proud to be with you.
Thank you, sir.